Hola, I'm Claudia Romo Edelman.
And I'm Cynthia Kleinbaum Milner.
And this is a podcast a la Latina.
The Playbook to succeed, being your authentic self.
Today, Kiki Del Valle, president for Mastercard Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean. And these are the 3 key takeaways.
Number 1, she gave us a framework for how to pick your next role based on the latest trends, what you're really passionate about, and where you can make a big impact.
Number 2, she shared how using her Latina values as her leadership superpowers have enabled her to attract the best talent and deliver better outcomes.
And number 3, how she has used her sense of curiosity as a catalyst for growth.
All of that and more here at A La Latina.
Stick around.
We've been discussing how important it is for Latinas to generate wealth, particularly because we understand that only 33% of Latinas have retirement income from savings or other assets. So how can your company help in this equation?
Well, we have several options for saving and investing accounts. The one for beginners, if you are a beginner, is our fully managed investing product. This is perfect for those who want to set it and forget it. You can select the risk level and even choose the type of companies you can invest in.
That's amazing. So what is the minimum needed to open an account?
$1. You just need $1. No excuses. The earlier you begin to invest, the sooner you will start seeing returns from your investment.
So how can people get started?
Simply download the Money Lion app and open a managed investment account. It's quick. It takes just a few minutes.
Perfect.
Let's do it.
Today, an incredible guest, Kiki Del Valle.
Kiki is president for Mastercard Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean. She is a board member for WaterAid Americas and the Damas Foundation in Puerto Rico, and she's on the advisory board of Women in Payments.
She was just granted the Alpha Award for Most Powerful Latinas in the U.S. and also the Most Influential Woman in FinTech from the American Banker magazine. Kiki, welcome to A La Latina.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
It's exciting, actually. You just got an award. You're probably feeling pretty good about yourself. Tell us a little bit more about your background. How did you grow up? What made you be who you are and what you do today?
I was born and raised in Puerto Rico. So I was there until I was 18, where I, like many other kids, we came to the U.S. to go to college. I grew up with a very close-knit family. My dad was a lawyer, my mom was an artist, believe it or not. So I grew up with having to use both sides of my brain. And I think I inherited a lot from both of them. So my ability to negotiate deals from my dad, but then from my mom, the creativity side and a little bit of that sense of entrepreneurship was all something that was very much ingrained in me from an early day. It was a very stable, safe, loving environment. So I had the quintessential loving life that anybody could actually wish for growing up. But it was also very demanding. My parents were ones that they wanted us to succeed. They demanded that we excelled in academics. They also demanded that we had a very balanced lifestyle. So the idea that we actually had to be part of sports, the idea that we also had to give back to the community, that was pretty much very ingrained in my development. So I'd like to say that I'm very conscientious about what it means to be part of the community, to give back, to lead with purpose. That has been a little bit of the journey that I've been in, and that it was actually passed on to my siblings and I, from both my dad and my mom.
Okay, so starting now, this is not a podcast about corporate America. This is about parenting, because I need to know how to do that, because usually most of the guests that we have actually had to overcome a lot. We've talked a lot about resilience and about overcoming hardship.
Yeah.
And it's great to see somebody who has a stable family, both parents working and loving, but still were able to instill the work ethic and the
sense of ambition.
Sense of ambition, exactly. Because the next generation of Latinos hopefully will have a lot less to overcome, but the values of being Latino can still come through in a good environment. You don't have to go through hardship.
But I think the sense of consistency, the sense of safety, the sense of it doesn't come without resilience, doesn't come without there being bigger ambitions or bigger targets or bigger goals that you want in life. For us, we saw it in a very different way. For example, Puerto Rico actually suffered many different hurricanes throughout every single year. We have some of the biggest hurricanes that you can imagine. It is an unstable environment from that sense. Hurricane Maria, being an example, 2017, was life-changing for many families, for many people. You have to get comfortable with the idea of rebuilding. But with that, having that sense of community actually brings you a different sense of accomplishment, a different sense of being able to work together towards a common goal. So the resilience came from external factors in my family that were not necessarily where my family was the binding knot that kept everybody together in my household. So I would say like without that, I would not be comfortable with change. And I do consider myself to be a change agent. It is a little bit of the way that my peers describe me, that my managers have actually described me. So
that
getting comfortable, that I'm a change agent. Like getting comfortable with the uncomfortable is important.
I do want to emphasize this piece, and she's so brilliant. Look, at the end of the day, we will have, if we manage to continue in the trajectory where we are, and if we manage to break the stereotypes that are stopping us and so on, we will have more stable, more, wealthy Latino families where Latinas are going to be able to succeed, not only being your authentic selves, but also having balanced lives. And that includes knowing how to be a good mother and knowing how to install this sense of responsibility and ambition in your kids. So I do think that it is important to make sure that we understand we're never going to lose our values. We're never going to lose the hard work, but we should actually say, aim higher and give back and do better. So for all the Latinas listening, it is great to see how you are committed to giving back. You are making it. And that, we all should be taking career notes and parenting notes at the same time.
Yeah. How did you decide what you were going to study? You left Puerto Rico, right?
Yes.
What was that decision-making process? Who guided you?
I think growing up in Puerto Rico, you always had one step in the US and one step in Latin America. You were always comparing and trying to figure out what was the best of both in terms of culture, in terms of education, in terms of values. So the decision to go to the US was very much instilled on me and really just allowed and promoted, or if you want, just pushed by my dad. So it was this belief that Puerto Rico is a small island. We were always looking outside of the island. We always had to think about the global mindset. We always travel and looked outside of Puerto Rico to try to figure out, how do I change the world? So the idea that I could change the world was always by my dad, by my parents, by both of them, something that always came as part of our values. So coming to the US was almost like a natural step in that trajectory. It was definitely my parents pushing to aim for more. And I think that's where a little bit of this idea of change agent kind of came to be. Because for the first time, I didn't have my safety net. I did not have my family there backing me up. I was on my own. So I had to almost practice what they had preached in a way that still allowed me to be my best self. So that change was definitely a big step for me. And one that I did not anticipate that I would remain in the US from then, because I have never been able, since that decision was made to actually come to college, I never went back. I never went back to Puerto Rico. So how do I give
in the
back?
US?
I studied in the US for college. So at 18, that was my first move. But I never went back to the island, right? So I still have my family in Puerto Rico. I still have my parents, my grandparents, aunts, uncles, whatever. But I never properly moved back to the island. So how do I make a change from where I'm at right now that can still drive some influence, that can still drive an impact in Puerto Rico?
How?
I think it's taken a while. Look, I think I started my career in the U.S. I worked for GE. I worked for Home Depot. I've been at Mastercard for 16 years. I started in the U.S. And that first trajectory to Mastercard really forced me to pick and be very conscientious and intentional about where I wanted to excel and what I wanted to do. So the first step for me was actually making a very conscious decision to really focus on digital and become a subject matter expert in digital. Mm-hmm. It was at a time that this wasn't prevalent. Digital commerce wasn't a thing. Amazon was still new.
Wow.
Apple did not have the iPhone. So this was post iTunes, but then pre-iPhone. This is when I joined. And I joined specifically to manage the e-commerce tech giants that we know right now, but they were also going through this evolution. So just as I was going through an evolution from a personal level, I think the companies that I was actually working with from the Mastercard side to drive partnerships, they were also evolving. So it led to a lot of learning. So that was my first step. I think from there, it was really around how do we make change working with some of these tech giants. Had the pleasure of actually, be part of the development team, be part of the launching team for solutions like Apple Pay, like Samsung Pay, like Google Pay. Those were all amazing initiatives that today you actually see the scale and the impact that they're driving for millions of consumers around the globe. So being part of that was definitely life-changing. And I think once that had been accomplished, then the question became a little bit of the aha moment, a little bit of the, this realization, like, well, what can I do? How do I use the skill sets? How do I use the things that I know, the innovations that you can play out for good? So if you can apply that to lead with purpose, then that became almost like the next natural step. And that's when I was able to come back to Latin America with Mastercard, but now have a more direct impact and indirectly, obviously, also impact my island of Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
So it's a full circle.
But wait, like you said, a number of things that I want to unpack.
Yeah.
And I know that we saw in your background internships as a way of exploring, because for someone that had very clear, like, aim higher, you can do it. You're like, yeah, but through what? And you were always somehow attracted to evolution, change, transformation, innovation. It seems to me that you were like attracted, like, this is this is the place and that's the category.
Yeah.
Through internships, did you do that through internships? How did you explore doing that?
I think part of it is in choosing, is purposefully, you choosing and deciding how are you going to make some of these steps, some of these moves. The way that I look at it is there's three things that you can control. One is, what are the trends that are happening around you, ideally? So I can look at what are the trends, the macro trends, what is happening around the globe, and that may actually have an impact. You see here or hear things like, cybersecurity. You hear about AI. You don't necessarily have to be a data scientist to work in the AI field. You can be in sales and still actually work on the AI field. So how do you become part of the growth? You can choose at what stage. Yes, you can, but you can choose at what stage of the mega trend do you want to join. You can choose, actually getting in when there's still growth opportunity, or you can choose when they're actually in decay, right? So, but in my case, I was very purposeful about looking at the macros and then being part of the wave early on, so I can ride the wave along with others. That naturally allowed me to have more opportunities that were opening up. It allowed me to have different profiles of people that I was working with. So, but beyond the macro, you need to think about what is it that you're good at? Are you curious about these trends? So again, going back to AI, if you're not curious about AI, then why would you actually go into an AI company? Or why would you go into that specific business unit within a company? So that question around, are you curious? Are you passionate about that specific area is important. And then the last thing that I always ask myself is, can I have an impact? And to me, impact is very much related to the change agent mindset. Do I want to go into a role where I am going to keep it as BAU because nothing is broken, because it's actually, it has reached its peak? Or do I want to be part of a role where I have an ability and permission to change it? Do I have permission to actually create a bigger impact? Do I have ideas that can actually, even early, even from the interview process, you can tell if you're going to be able to change something or if you're expected to just ride the wave as is. So those three things, I've always been very careful about looking at it that way.
My son is obsessed about how internships will roll his entire life, will determine his life. And I'm like, no, it's an experiment, but he's looking at how do I choose?
He's looking at the big picture.
He's looking at how do I choose from everything that I have?
Yeah.
And I think that this framework of look at the macro trend, look at your curiosity and to your prone interest towards it, and how can you, have an impact with it. That's a perfect framework. And so that's what you did.
That's what I did. I think throughout my career, with every single career decision that I have made, it's always in the back of my mind asking the question, what will I gain from moving into this role? And what will the company gain also from me moving into this role? Because then you will find the sponsors, and then you will find the people that are betting on you and taking the risk with you, and helping you along the way. So having that in the back of your mind is always important.
I mean, I'm a little disappointed that I just met you, because this framework would have saved me a lot of headaches. So I'm gonna repeat it because I think it's super important. if you want to take a job, it's either internally or in a new employer, the framework is, number one, is this a trend that is growing, right? Number two, are you passionate about it? And then the third one, can you make an impact? So don't make my mistakes, listen to Kiki.
And be objective about the trends. A lot of people ask, well, how do you know if a trend is actually relevant or not? Yes, because the trends, you can hear a lot about it on the news and whatever. But what I tell people is the management team talking about it? Are the investments of the organization going into that area?
Yeah.
Is the company backing it up?
Yeah.
So again, putting yourself in a position of growth around you.
That's why you not only landed, but you basically arrived to innovative processes that now have been global and taken, like Apple Pay.
Yes.
I mean, I'm sorry, what an honor to have a pioneer Latina that was early on in, in amplifying something like the connection between Mastercard and Apple Pay. So I want to give you kudos. I would like to understand a little bit more about that and also get more into your career at Mastercard.
Sure.
But before doing that, I have to make a pause to make sure that everybody understands I'm not dressed as a piñata just for the sake of it. I am on brand. Can't see my trousers, but I'm absolutely Mastercard branded today for this conversation.
So I love
exactly. All right. So tell us more about that. And kudos. Congrats.
No, thank you. Look, I think that back then, and this is actually a great example, because back then I had been the account manager for Mastercard, managing the Apple relationship for about three to 4 years, before we began discussions with Apple about ideally what was a global trend, which was how does Apple become a digital wallet? Mm-hmm. So of course, many other organizations
which is crazy to think,
kind of
right?
Thinking
Apple,
about it.
How are you?
But these were the early
that?
discussions.
Yeah.
These were the early discussions.
Now it sounds
do
so
we want to
obvious,
play?
right?
But totally not.
Correct.
Yeah.
They were not. They were intentional, and they were about even talking to Apple about the world of payments, which is a world that they didn't necessarily understand. I mean, besides being a retailer, besides being acceptors of payments, there's so many business models that that Apple could have come up with, that we could have actually partnered on. But the idea that you could actually have a user interface provided by Apple, whereby you have a tokenized card on the Apple with Mastercard credentials on that device, with credentials that are safe in the secure element of the phone, where privacy is at its foundation, with core values, that Apple was looking to bring between security and safety and privacy. Those were core values that we at Mastercard also had. So what brought us together was the values. How you start building from there was a process that literally took us over 2 years to really define. So, and behind the scenes, my parents, for example, had no idea what I was doing with Apple, because we were subject to confidentiality agreements, personal confidentiality agreements. So we had teams, massive teams at Mastercard, close to 500 people that were working on what is now Apple Pay, and people knew. But the platform that is really standing up, the tokenization, all these solutions with APIs, Apple could directly connect it into Mastercard, all of that we had to build. So it was a period of transformation for us at Mastercard, and to have that front seat, to be able to actually work with Apple, sit with them through the development of the ideas, of the principles, teaching them a little bit about, what are the rules, regulations that we need to adapt without crossing the line that they didn't want to take. Yeah. These were fundamental. People obviously now don't see it. I mean, what you see is today what is Apple Pay or Google Pay, which are amazing, and Samsung Pay, amazing solutions to the consumers. But behind the scenes, a lot of work actually had to happen, had to take place.
And you know exactly what I'm going to say, which is it had to be a Latina. It had to be Latinidad values, which install trust, innovation, bringing the entire team with you, because we lead like mothers. So you bring everybody with you. So you have to evangelize this side, convince the other side, and there
was a lot of internal and external negotiations taking place throughout the entire process, yes. But it was, for me, for example, it was also a conscious decision to remain in the role that I was in. A lot of people would have said, well, you've already been in the role for 3 years, go look for something else. I saw that this could actually be career-changing. I saw that it could be life-changing, right? I mean, this was going to have an impact on consumers. So from a professional standpoint, I decided to stay put. And I stayed put, where I led the Apple relationship for close to 7 years for Mastercard, because I wanted to see the deployment of Apple Pay because I wanted to see it roll out. So once Apple Pay rolled out and Google Pay, we actually had rolled it out also to not just in the US, but in the UK, in Australia. So this took me also into much more of a global role. Once it was rolled out and I reached almost like the peak of what I thought, okay, my change or my impact has been realized, that's when I decided to make a move into my next role. So don't pick too early. I think a lot of people think like, well, roles are time-based.
Yeah.
You need to move every 2 years, especially the younger generation. They think like, oh, I'm going to change roles every year and a half or every 2 years. If you're not reaching that peak, that impact peak, and there's still opportunity, then stay put. You're better off staying put and then making the change once you actually climb that hill.
Yeah, we haven't heard this. We've heard before lateral moves, but I really like this idea of, obviously, I'm a big fan of the don't try to get a promotion every 2 years. That's like an artificial way of growing. And at some point after, I guess when we finish season 3, I'm going to do a data analysis of all the guests and how many promotions they got earlier in their career. And I can almost assure you that it wasn't a lot. Like it was a good progression, but you, the women that have been in this podcast and that are at the top of the most important companies in the US did not rush the promotions at the beginning. Like you guys had a long-term view of your career. And somehow this is not what the younger generation is going for. It's like somebody has told them that the sooner you get to VP, the better. And you have people with 5 years of experience that have a VP title. Like, what does the title do? Like, you're going to be VP for the rest of your life then, you know?
But wait. Before we move out of that, I do want to make sure that we do send a message to both the corporations and the Latinas about what does it mean to have a Latina in charge? Because of our Latinidad, because we're hardworking, because we bring someone with us, because it's that social that leads people as a family, that you build trust, because you're able to, in a way, build those relationships, because we don't give up, because we're resilient, because we're resourceful. Because of that, you can make those gigantic steps like creating a vaccine for COVID or like launching Apple Pay to the world because of who we are. And somehow I don't have a sense that companies have got the memo, like, oh, that's the soft skill that of the Latinas that I have that is going to be able to bring to the table massive change. And I don't think that Latinas ourselves, we know consciously, we haven't had a boom moment, an Aztec moment about like, wow, I'm not exploiting, like my absolute Latinidad assets to bring that massive change. So I think that we know.
I think there's incredible things to be said about a la Latinidad, to the point of a la Latinidad, where Latinas are very highly ambitious. Latinas are extremely hard workers. And to your point, they're very resilient. In my role, what helped me also, propel and really position myself very differently than many others was the fact that I was able to carry and get and build a lot of trust, internal and external, because that was my role. I had to, as an account manager, be the connector. And that's another point. Building the connections between the customer and internally within Mastercard to make sure that we were responding with agility, that we were addressing the pain points that the customer had, that they understood the role that we played. Because again, companies on the tech side, amazing at building UIs. They are not payment companies. Mm-hmm. So we had to teach them. There was also an element of humility that they actually have to accept that if they didn't know, they had to ask the question. But for that to actually happen in a natural way, there had to be a level of trust that we were bringing to the table. And we are amazing at that. Building the connections, I had so many people from the customer side that would come to me and would call me and would say like, Kiki, I'm in the advertising side of the business. Have you heard of anybody being interested in small business within my company? Within their own company, I was actually making connections because my network was so broad that I could connect people, whether it was internally within Mastercard or actually even within their own walls at the organization. That was the value that I was bringing. Exactly. And a lot of that is because of trust and because of the relationships that we can build.
So what we need to do and make sure, and now I'm going to move on, but what we need to do is make sure that we're flipping the script from stereotype to actual fact
to an asset.
No, we don't have, and then we make it a superpower. Yeah. Like your accent shouldn't be the determinant of people thinking you're stupid or less competent. It is a bilingualism, biculturalism, negotiation skill, but also it's your superpower to get companies like an Apple to all of a sudden think that they can do pay. Crazy, right? Simple but crazy. Let's flip the script from under to a plus and then to a super plus, a superpower.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk about your superpower. We've spoken a little bit about your negotiation skills. What else? What are your superpowers? If your team described you, or like you get reviews all the time, what are the things that people say about you?
So besides a change agent, because like I said, I think I'm very comfortable finding the white spots. I'm very comfortable finding opportunities once you actually start seeing the big picture. I think it's a sense of curiosity. And I think that's another one that once you accept that change is inevitable, once you accept that change is almost like the only constant that we have in life, because let's be honest, today is not the same day as yesterday. It's not going to be the same day as tomorrow. I think you get comfortable or you get interested and curious about learning more. So the idea, and that curiosity will expand to many different things, depending on people themselves. But that's having that sense of curiosity, extremely important, especially in a fast-moving industry like payments. Yeah. I have to stay ahead. I have to understand what are the latest things, the latest threats, for example, in cybersecurity. How is AI potentially helping many of my customers? How are we developing and evolving some of our products and solutions? So we have to grow with the times. And to do that, there is a sense of curiosity that you need to have so that you can be a well-rounded individual. It doesn't even need to stay within the professional landscape, right? I mean, I love visiting, art museums, as an example. I love spending time with my kids. I love doing sports. But I also have my own personal interests that become conversation starters, that become ways in which you can draw a connection with somebody else. Doing yoga or doing Pilates, for example. These are conversation openers, ways to connect from the human side with different people. So I think that is you are what you bring to the table. Yeah. Is what I like to tell my kids. So the more that you know, the more well-rounded that you are, the better that you will be in anything, in life and in work.
When I was working at Walmart, I met somebody that was what I thought, like, he had the career that I wanted to have. And I put time in his calendar. I was like, can you mentor me? And in the 30 minutes that I spent with him, all he spoke about was curiosity. He said his career took off because he was a very curious person. He recommended a book, which is actually called Curious, or A Curious Mind, from Brian Glazer, the guy that directs movies with Ron Howard. And I just became fascinated about this idea of just always being a sponge, because sometimes you feel like, okay, I'm old enough. Like I already learned as much as I could
I'm already
learn.
The expert.
Yeah, I'm already the expert. And it made me really change how I approach conversations and how I'm always trying to consume information. How do you consume information? Like when you want to stay up to date, like what do you do?
Look, I read a lot. I read every single day before going to bed. And I can read everything from a fictional book to a real-life autobiography.
The Hispanics are children's book.
The Hispanics and children's book, which I think are amazing. The Sonia Sotomayor, definitely a good one. But I can read that to actually get my mind and to really hone in on my creative side. So I purposely read fictional books to actually practice my creative mindset, to obviously listening to podcasts, and to listening to news, to listening to A La Latina. I mean, these are great ways for you to be able to learn a little bit more, to better yourself, and also to stay up to date. So podcasts, whether they are, Mastercard's podcast, which actually highlights a lot on what are some of the latest trends, to podcasts around women and women in power and women that hold leadership positions. Those are all good things. So I do that on my way to work every morning. I do that before I go to bed. So throughout the day, very difficult to do. So I choose to actually do that even ahead of actually watching a TV show. So I read a lot.
And your kids probably also are a source of inspiration. And
my kids know the trends better than I do.
Yes, exactly.
And the slang, understanding their slang. I need a new dictionary.
In this aspect, more than asking you about what techniques you use as a mentor, what makes a good mentee?
I've had the pleasure, and I'll say that. So before the role that I'm in right now, leading Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean, I used to lead different verticals within Latin America, governments, but also fintechs and digital partners and retailers. And with fintechs, early on startups, there was a lot of opportunity that I had in being able to advise many of them. What models should you bring? What is the technology that you have? And from that, where could you potentially differentiate yourself? So that opened my ability to work with many different entities. What I know, or what I have found, is that the best mentees are those that, one, are willing to listen, that come with their own agenda about what is it that they're expecting from that mentor-mentee relationship. They come with a plan. They come with a series of questions. They come prepared. Not everyone comes prepared. A lot of them look at it as only a stepping stone towards their next career opportunity. A lot of people that are seeking out that mentor-mentee relationship is more because they're ready to take on a new role and they're expecting a promotion or they're expecting a career change. That, to me, is the worst type of relationship that you can actually start with. Do you want a relationship that is about trust? You want a relationship that is almost like a friendship that you're actually building. Because even if this mentor cannot properly help you in your career path right now, the more that you disclose about yourself, the more vulnerable that you are, that person will build that relationship. That person will remember when a position actually comes. But positions don't come every single day. So building the relationship is the most important, as well as actually having a plan. What is it that you're expecting on both sides? Because mentors have an expectation as well of what kind of relationship they want to build. The same is with a mentee. The earlier that you can actually agree or align on the goals and objectives of that relationship, the better everybody will be.
Have you heard of this idea of reverse mentorship? I think it is. Do you have a young mentor that tells you what's cool and what's the next trend?
I do, and something that I actually have a shadow day coming up with a series of people that are going to be shadowing me. And if I tell you that my expectation from that shadow day is that I would like to capture the feedback, the input, the learnings, or even ideas that the younger employees are gonna be able to bring me.
Yeah.
So, we do a shadow day, which is people for 3 days kind of like following me, joining me in meetings, joining me with customers, asking questions. But it's not an observer role. I'm expecting them to also be part of the conversation. I'm expecting them to engage and to also not just give me feedback, but for me to actually capture some of the ideas that they may have. So it's a nice way of actually bringing this reverse mentoring concept.
Yeah.
But again, it goes back to what are the expectations that the mentor has. So in this case, I think there's more value to me personally than people obviously seeing me in action.
Yeah.
Kiki, why haven't we heard more about Kiki? I would like to know whether there was anything that was holding you back from shining, because that's something very, very common for Latinas.
Yeah.
Even for me, I have to say, at my previous job at the United Nations, you had basically choices that were clear. Either you get credit and you shine, or you get things done. And I was a doer. So I was like, for me, like, I'm gonna always do the speeches of my bosses, but I'll make sure that I know what they want them to say. It took me a while to be able to feel comfortable speaking and getting the spotlight until I realized it was important to be able to be relevant, to be able to be trusted, to be able to get more impact.
Yeah.
What is your trajectory with perception and with shine? Or not shine, but like with exposure. Like, great that you have these 2 awards.
Yeah.
How did you come to that place of like, yes, I'll do it?
I think it clicked a little bit for me 3 years ago, where I felt that I had accomplished a certain level of initiatives or a certain level of success where I could feel like my trajectory matters. And I think that for many of us, we are comfortable, and my focus up until then had been internally within the organization, internally within Mastercard, building a solid brand, building a trusted brand, building myself as somebody that is efficient, that can deliver, that drives results, that is a doer, to your point. That had been the focus. Early in the career, early in 15 years at Mastercard, 16 now. So 15 years at Mastercard, I dedicated a lot of time to building that reputation. So I think we're comfortable doing that. I think if you had asked people within Mastercard, they would be able to tell you, yes, who Kiki is. People in the industry, my immediate industry, may know. obviously, from some of these engagements. How do you actually take that to the global scale? That was the question. So I think 2 to 3 years ago is when I had a realization and an aha moment where it was almost like, okay, how do I now take this to share with the world in a way that they understand that the impact that I'm driving is not just about, payments, but it's also about other things. So it took me on a journey where I became part of not-for-profit boards. So purposefully, I was like, okay, how do I now help, for example, get women on boards as an example. So I'm now part of Women on Boards. I'm now part of LCDA. The Latino Corporate Directors Association. I'm also sitting on boards myself, trying to carry, some of the values and purpose that I want to bring, but where I felt like I can actually bring something to the table that is bigger than just the ideas that I had within my industry. So I think this idea that you can give more and that you can put yourself to represent for the Latinas, for example.
Being a role model.
I had to get comfortable with. Yeah, I had to get comfortable with that. It happened, once I turned 40, I think, where it was like, okay, how do I now put myself in that role and carry the responsibility? So even within Mastercard, how do I put myself as one of the top Latina women at Mastercard? How do I put myself and bring change? Because with that responsibility also comes the idea that you have to deliver and you have to create change.
And how has been that journey of from being, private to being public and speaking up more and showing yourself? Has it been easy? What has helped you to get, me, I can tell you, it was a journey. Literally, I never spoke in public before until a couple of years ago. Yeah, totally. For me, it was a hard journey to get more comfortable with public speaking, with understanding what my voice was.
Yeah.
I had to take a lot of courses and watch a lot of videos. How was your journey?
It's difficult. And I think it's difficult for me personally because you have to get comfortable with being vulnerable. And people don't like being vulnerable. I don't like being vulnerable. I don't like talking about mistakes, or I don't like talking about, challenges or issues. We tend to lean on the optimistic side, right? I mean, I'm a glass half full kind of person. I always like to look at the sunny side. I always like to look at the positive. I will say, okay, we had a setback, but then let's get over it. So personally, I have a challenge being vulnerable. But in order to put yourself in public speaking, not talking about payments. I'm very comfortable talking on stage about what payments. I know. I'm very comfortable talking about payments. I'm very comfortable talking about trends in the industry and financial services. I've had to do that, and that was something that I learned. Early in my role, I was given the opportunity to just represent Mastercard in many different things. It wasn't about being in front of an audience. It was more about being in front of an audience where I'm actually telling my story. That was a different kind of vulnerability, right? Because then you're having to share about your life, about what you like, what you don't like, the setbacks. So and you get exposure. It helped to have a support group. It helped to have sponsors. I'm very lucky that at Mastercard, we do have great leadership team. And in my case, I do have great sponsors, including the CEO, who I just met yesterday. I just had a meeting with him yesterday. Not the first time that I've met him, but they're very approachable, very open, and very supportive of me taking on this journey. So the support that I can get from them, even talking about, how do I help you get on boards, Kiki? If this is your interest, let me help you.
We should tell them to support you coming with the Hispanic delegation to Davos. That's what I think.
Oh, there you go. We can ask the team that. Happy to do it.
Just on the last piece on this is someone from Mastercard, as a fact, gave me a piece of insight that I will never forget. Said wow, I heard you talking about Latinos. We don't necessarily, we're Latinos and we're fighting and working and, barely making it, between your family and this, and particularly if you're a Latina. But all of a sudden, I heard you talk and it made me realize I never acted on my Latinidad within my company. I never realized I was one of the top Latinas in my company, and I never did ERGs, I never did affinity groups, I never did anything to role model, I never exposed myself as a Latina. I never told anybody I was a Latina because I didn't need to. No one asked me. It's not that she was denying it, and I never had that moment. So I hope that, like with the awards and with the journey, that you're getting more and more Latinas get inspired to raise a hand and say, like, I want that job, I want that award, I want that opportunity, I want that microphone, I want to speak, I want to share.
I think people would be surprised at the amount of support that we get when we speak up and when we actually put ourselves out there and when we share our content. I think, one of the pivotal moments in my career was immediately after Hurricane Maria in 2017. I felt hopeless. I felt like I could not do anything. Being in the US, and I had my family in Puerto Rico and basically struggling because they could not get, for example, access to water. I had, for 9 days, my parents, I did not have a communication with my parents post the hurricane. And for those of you that may not know, Hurricane Maria was a catastrophic hurricane, Category 5, over 100 years. It was the worst hurricane that the island had actually faced. And for 9 days, I could not communicate. I did not know if my parents were okay because they could not communicate with me for 9 days. So it was horrendous. For 9 months, my parents did not have water access. So how that takes me into my own professional journey, the first board that I joined was Water Aid Americas. Their focus is in actually giving access to water for underserved communities. Because as much as people may not know, but over 2 billion people around the world don't have access to water. Safe water. So water is life. We all know that. They teach you that in elementary school. So imagine not being able to have access to like the most basic need. And that took me that brought me to the realization that I needed to do more for Latin America. So what did I do? I changed jobs from being global focused at the time, which I was in a global product role, to then moving into Mastercard and LIC. So again, being purposeful about, okay, can I do something about it? Just ask yourself, can you do something about it? And what is the legacy that you want to build? So in my case, it was very much about, okay, let me try to use what I know, to use my skill sets and my knowledge base to try to change the game in Latin America. And it's been fantastic. It's been a digitization journey. It's been a fintech journey. Fintechs are the highest penetration of fintechs for Mastercard in the world is in Latin America. People may not know that. We have more digital accounts in Latin America than anywhere else in the world. It's amazing. It's something to be proud of. So telling that story also becomes important. So I think as I think about my journey is how do I tie the payments and the impact that we can drive on the business side, but then also with, okay, what else can I do to give back? What else can I do to change the game for myself, but then also for my daughter and for everybody else that comes behind me or next to me?
I love that. We're having an awakening moment, and I hope that more and more Latinas can use their voice to support each other as well.
Absolutely.
I don't think we asked you this question. I wanted to ask you before, and it's not super clear to me yet. So you've been in Mastercard for 16 years. Mm-hmm. I know, because I'm also in the industry, many people in Mastercard. It's a company that is full of talent, there's other Latinas, but there's a lot of women and there's a lot of super smart people, and somehow you stood out. Right? Like not everybody got to the top the way that you did. What do you attribute to the success? You've spoken a little bit about some sponsors.
Yeah.
Also, you've spoken about your Latinidad. You haven't said this, but there was an element of luck, like being prepared.
Absolutely.
Right? But what do you think it's what was your secret sauce?
Look, I think that in my case, I think the combination of being able to be in the right place at the right time. So there is an element of luck. Mm-hmm. There's also an element of what I said before, of understanding where can I drive the biggest impact and where can I potentially serve the organization in a way that serves me as well. Mm-hmm. So meaning, are there initiatives that I can help drive or that I can be a part of that are really changing the landscape or changing the ecosystem in a way that is going to have a lasting impact. So I think the initiatives that I've been able to be a part of gave me exposure. how do you use that exposure, to continue learning, to continue challenging yourself? But I've been very lucky in that sponsors have actually sought me out. Sponsors, and also in building the brand, people understand that I will give it my all. People know that I will work hard. People know that I will be able to deliver. So that's really important. And that's how you get, these connections and this network. And I do pride myself in having a very broad network within the company and outside. That opens doors. You'd have to prove yourself once you obviously open the door, but that opens the door. So serving as a connector has been a superpower of mine as well, externally within the company, but then also internally. So it's the sponsors, but it is also the peers, and it is also the teams, my teams or even others that see the value and that want to work with me. So if they want to work with me, I capture the best talent. And if I capture the best talent, then they rise, and I rise. So you have to have a very strong brand within the company, and you have to have proof points to obviously back it out. But once you have that talent that wants to work with you, you only get better.
So on the network and the connector, I think that there's a myth within the Latino community that is changing, by the way, that is like a scarcity mentality. So you don't connect, you don't open the door. There's one seat at the table, you make it and you close the door and you're like, I made it. And so on. But the more you connect people, the more you use your network to connect, the more connected you will be. The more you empower others, the more empowerment you will get. Can you talk about that for a second, and then we can dive into Latinidad?
I think you touch on this one. I think there's a level of competitiveness and competition that I feel is artificial, and people think that by closing the door on somebody, then you put yourself in a better spot. That's never the case. That's never the case for women. It's never the case for Latinas. It's never the case for anybody. I mean, I can open doors and still walk through the door with somebody right next to me. So I look at it almost as help me help you. Like I will do you a favor, and at some point you will also help me, kind of like bring me up. So I think that there's more of I look at it in the context of a sense of community, of camaraderie, of being able to kind of like lift yourself up, but also lift others. So I think when you look at it from a competitive point of view, everybody loses.
Yeah, absolutely. You have been working for many years in corporations. Mm-hmm. Have you ever had to dial down? Like let's talk about identity. Have you ever had to dial down, or actually on the contrary, have you been able to double down on your Latinidad to help just broadly?
Yeah. I think I think there's a few things that I have learned throughout my career. The language bias is real. I think the language bias in the US especially is something that holds a lot of people back, that may prevent a lot of people from growing into other roles. So I think to some extent, yes, I've worked hard to actually minimize my accent, right? But it's not a bad thing. I mean, I don't look at it necessarily as a bad thing. I'm fluent in Spanish, I'm fluent in English. I mean, I can navigate both. I mean, I bring my identity as part of that. I bring my identity even with my name. I've never changed my name. Kiki is my nickname. Kiki, if anything, has actually served me for people to remember me. Yeah. Because it's such an easy name that I've actually found that it is kind of like a superpower also, right? It's like, well, people remember, they may not remember whatever, Maria Alejandra, whatever, but they do remember Kiki. So
that's your name, Maria Alejandra?
No. It's actually...
Is it a secret, or can you share your name?
So I don't usually share it, but my real name...
You don't have to.
My real name is Janet. Janet is my mom's name. I never really took on the name because, to be honest with you, it was my mom's name.
No, so Kiki is a great name.
Is my name, and everybody at work kind of knows me by that. But I think language, kind of going back to that point, the language bias is real. I think I always think about the Modern Family episode where Sofia Vergara basically says, do you know how smart I am in Spanish?
I know, I say that all the time.
Correct. So it is something that I fall back on every once in a while, because in my head I may actually think of a word, but I think about it in Spanish. So I take the time to pause, and it's okay to pause, and it's okay to basically say, give me a second. while I gather my thoughts, you know? So that's fine. But spend the time to actually do it, to slow it down. But I do think that is something that we have to overcome. The other thing that I believe we have to purposely know, and once you know, you will pay attention to it, is the power distance. In Latin America, we suffer from a high power distance. What is power distance? Is the ability that you basically have an authoritative figure and the belief that you obviously have to abide by hierarchies. We do it because we have grown up to understand when I say it, you guys are gonna recognize it. We have grown up to actually recognize that we need to respect our elders and we respect our grandparents, and you don't answer back and you don't question what they say. So your elders, there's a level of respect that we have as a culture towards, more knowledgeable, older generations, for example. Mm-hmm. It is the same when you apply it to the workplace. Many people, including people even within my team, they will go to their manager before they come to me, for example, or they believe that they cannot actually reach me, or that they should not be sending me an email directly, for example, if their manager is not copied. Mm-hmm. So there is a checkpoint. When you think about being efficient, being, or even the U.S. culture, it doesn't operate like that. Mm-hmm. I can feel comfortable sending a message to the CEO of Mastercard and know that he's going to be responding back to me. Yet we in Latin America, more often than not, do believe that there is still, the power distance is higher.
So you're saying that we shouldn't do that?
I believe that you should be adjusting to and really trying to accommodate to whatever works for the organization, to whatever works for you and also for the people. But you should be taking risk, and you should be actually more open, more conscious. Am I doing this to check myself? Am I doing this because it is my boss demanding that I actually need to check with him before emailing myself? Is that something that we need to challenge? So if we need to challenge it, then let's make a conscious effort about doing that. But I think you will find that there is support from other areas of from the organization as a whole, because it is not the U.S. way. Mm-hmm. So if once you recognize that, then how you can play with a different set of rules.
Don't challenge la abuelita and the chancla culture.
No.
Bring it to the work. Bring it to the work.
Yeah. I would never be able to challenge my abuelita. She's 92 years old.
I think that the issue is that if the culture of the company is that of being less hierarchical,
to that.
And you as Latino don't do it, people will think that you're less ambitious or less committed or less passionate when you're just being respectful.
If you don't adapt, then you will be overlooked.
Exactly.
Then you will be left behind. Exactly. So we cannot say that we didn't try or that we didn't, go for that position when others are actually doing that, and we're holding ourselves back.
Yeah, I like that. If you work in a flat organization, don't work hierarchically.
Yeah.
Just like you're a Kiki. No, hierarchically.
Yeah, Kiki. One of our favorite topics, and the people on social media love this idea, and I think it's because it's really resonating. The concept is that there are certain values that we have, and we've touched on many of them. And for years, they have been seen as negatives in corporate America. We care a lot about our families. How can we care about work? We are loud. Is that like now we're saying we're actually passionate, or we speak with an accent, we're bilingual, that's good. Are there specific examples that you have on something that you feel like has been seen as a negative, and that you would like it for companies to see it as a positive?
I think that you're too passionate can come back as a negative also. I think I've actually heard it in a very negative way. You're too passionate about a topic, or you're too passionate about Latinidad. I mean, and it's like, well, why is that a bad thing? So the too passionate, especially for me, is a challenging one, or I would challenge that one, because passionate means motivated. It means being curious. It means committed. It means, being able to really drive or want to deliver results or drive change or whatever it may be. So the too passionate often comes out when you're speaking, or it can come out as you're being loud, or you're speaking without taking pauses, We tend to also speak in a way very, very fast, especially when we like something, or when we're nervous, by the way. But especially when we like something, we don't tend to take pauses, or we don't tend to. So they will. I've actually heard the feedback like, "Well, you're too passionate about that topic," and it's like, okay,
it's like good. Too. You can't put the word "too" before passionate.
Correct.
Right.
So I do think that one is one that comes with the Latino culture. I think we need to embrace it, to be quite frankly. I think it's a beautiful thing that we are passionate, that we're passionate about culture, about language, about arts, about, dance, about what food. I mean, whatever that may be, it's who we are. So the passionate, I'll always look at it as a positive. And whenever I hear that being said or being told to me, it's like, well, yeah, I'll take that as a compliment.
So for HR, people hiring out there, we're going to send you a little cultural nuances of Latino so that you know when someone appears too passionate, you have someone that is going to be committed, that is going to be persistent, that is not going to give up and it's not going to drop ball. When you listen to someone with an accent, but also, if you're a Latina, please acknowledge it. Just say it. You might think I'm very passionate, but that translates into, right?
Yes, I think it's a badge of honor. The fact that you're passionate means that you care. It means that you're going to be the one that actually finished whatever was started. It means that you're going to be a doer. So there's so many things, positive things that come with that. So don't let it be a negative.
Exactly. Wear it with a badge of honor.
Badge of honor. Okay, so now our closing questions. If you could give advice to Kiki when she was in her 30s, maybe you were a manager, senior manager, what would you tell her?
I will give you one that is probably not work related. I think the most important decision that you could ever make in your life is actually choosing the right partner. I think that I will not be able to do what I do if it's not for my husband, if it's not for him actually taking on a little bit more of the load of the household. It's for him even taking steps back in his own personal career growth. And he will never tell you that he's actually has actually sacrificed himself or taking any steps back. But the idea that you can build a life with somebody, that you can actually share the values and the objectives of what you want your household and your home to be is super important. That to me was the most important decision that I ever had to make in my life. And it has, it has worked today. And definitely, I think it came with some sacrifices for him, sacrifices for me as well. Yeah. But he's the constant in the home. So I think if I had to choose something, it could be the difference between you actually having a great life or you being miserable. So I mean, just make the right decision for who you're going to be spending your life with.
So Kiki, 65 years old. Yeah. What advice would she giving here to you right now?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I think just have fun. Just enjoy life.
We hear this all the time.
And again.
This is what all of us say.
I think we're always on the move. We're always trying. We're always aiming for more. We're always kind of always thinking about, which is great. But we need to have fun along the way. We need to stop and go on vacation and shut off your phone and spend time with the kids
because everything will be okay.
Of course, everything will be okay.
Yeah. Last question. Who else should we bring to the podcast? Any women you would like to refer?
Oh, there are some amazing rock stars. Let me think. I would be remiss if I don't say Priscilla Almodovar, which I don't know if you guys have actually brought her, but she's obviously the only CEO of Fannie Mae, only Latina women CEO of a Fortune 500. So she's a rock star. I think Paula Santilli. Paula is the CEO of PepsiCo in Latin America.
Yes.
She's doing amazing work when it comes to really trying to drive digitization for the SME, for the small business. She's changing the game in many cases, and we have partnerships with Pepsi that are really going to be very unique.
That is really random, by the way. Mastercard and Pepsi, you wouldn't think about it, but
we are digitizing SMEs in Latin America, and it's amazing. We're using WhatsApp platforms. We're using innovations that it's not even seen here in the U.S.
Yeah.
So it's really cool. And I think a third one, Silvina Moschini.
Yes, I love her. I love her,
So
absolutely.
she's fantastic. She's a rock star in the crypto space.
Okay.
So obviously, if you want somebody that is thinking about future trends, crypto, how are Latin Americans thinking about crypto, which is much more of a savings tool, not necessarily always investing. It's another good reference.
Great. Thank you.
Kiki Del Valle, you're just fantastic. This podcast was amazing. I learned so much, not only about you, but also about frameworks that are going to be so useful for so many people.
I would be remiss if I didn't say that this was priceless.
Thank you so much.
Well, Kiki, thanks to you and the lessons that you've been giving us, hopefully many Latinas can lead and succeed
A la Latina!